Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Courtney Lovely Evans, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Athletics at Palm Beach Atlantic University. I've had the opportunity to participate in several NCAA leadership development programs that I believe prepared me for the chair, the Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute, and Achieving Communication Success. Both of those programs allowed me to meet several thought leaders in our industry, as well as me working on developing my personal leadership philosophy. As a leader, it's important for you to communicate your expectations to your staff. At Palm Beach Atlantic University, we are developing Christian game changers, and it is our desire to be the standard in Division II.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive leadership in college athletics. Our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Jacobs. Jennifer
Hello.
is the head volleyball coach at Augustana and also co-founder of Inclusion Inroads. Greetings, Dr. Jacobs. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And yes, doctorate is done.
There it is. Doctorate is done. In the last year, we have completed a doctorate.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about this doctorate. Is it an educational doctorate? Is it a PhD? Is it a psychology? Like, what are we doing? Where are we at here with that?
Yeah, it's an EDD, so education in leadership, doctorate. And it took a little bit, took the whole 4 years, but I'm so glad to be done and have those letters behind my name finally.
Okay. Educational. So in higher education, tell me why you felt like that was necessary. Was that a goal of yours? Is that something to help you in your career? Tell me about, you want to be a president one day? Like, what's happening? Tell me about that.
Yes. yes, and yes.
Okay.
I've always wanted a terminal degree. And so it wasn't a matter of when I was going to get my doctorate. It was just a matter of when. And the program came up at the right time. It was an evening program and a weekend program. And so Thursday nights, I was in class from 5 to 9 for 3 years straight. And the leadership piece was broad enough. And I really liked the idea of the EDD versus the PhD because the program was like, we want you to solve or attempt to solve an issue or problem within your current work environment.
Oh, okay.
And so that was kind of very appealing for me. I'm a doer, I'm a fixer, and I see a lot of things that need to be fixed in collegiate athletics. So that's kind of where that came from for me.
Yeah, that's super interesting. My assumption is that you had to cap it off with some type of research or some type of dissertation or publish something. So talk to us about your research.
Yeah. So my problem, I'll tell you what the problem is to begin with. So the problem was that I felt like there still aren't enough Black women or women of color in athletic administration positions. And so that was where I started. And I really was trying to, as I started doing the research, I was learning all these previous studies that have been done, but a lot of the studies were around what it took Black women to get into those leadership positions and really not about what happens when they get there and their environment that's surrounding them, either supporting them or not. And so I took my research around that question a different angle. And so essentially I looked at what were the perceptions of inclusion in kind of Black women who were deputy, associate, or assistant athletic director roles. And if their perceptions of inclusion impacted their lived experience in their work environment and whether they believe they could thrive or not in their roles. So that it was a lot of work and a lot of fun though, because I got to interview these amazing women at all levels in the NCAA collegiate athletics realm, Division 1, 2, and 3, deputy, associate, assistant athletic director roles. And I asked them a lot of really, really heartfelt questions on what it feels like to be them in their roles.
Yeah, I think that's actually excellent. One of the questions you mentioned was, do they believe they could thrive in their role? Is that like a yes/no question? Like, so you got some responses that were like, yeah, nah, here it's all bad. Like, tell me about that.
Yes and yes, both,
Okay.
all. So the original, my actual questions when I was in the interview process, I asked the women to tell me about a time they felt included in the workplace, and how'd that make me feel? How'd that make them feel? What happened? Tell me, the surrounding environment. And then the next thing I asked them was, tell me about a time you felt excluded in the workplace and how that made them feel and what were the kind of circumstances around it. And and then the next questions then after that was, did you feel like you could thrive in either one of those moments in time? And so we took snapshots of these women's experiences, and there was a plethora of experiences, and I was in it with them. I mean, most of the interviews I had planned on taking an hour. We went over time in many of them because they had some really good stories, and in my dissertation, I really try to bring forth their stories. And the sad part, the hard part, which is kind of what I was expecting, uh, was there was way more exclusionary moments or stories or times that these women experienced versus the inclusive moments. And so that was just as I got into the research and listening to them, that really was confirming what I had already thought. Um, and then like on the flip side, on the good side, the times that the women had inclusive moments where they felt that they were a part of the environment and they felt like they could thrive, there was definitely a tie to their leader or boss at that time. So whether that was the athletic director, a few women mentioned other like VPs in that kind of presidential leadership realm. Uh, but there was a direct tie between leadership behavior and whether the women felt included or not. Um, that was probably the biggest. I know we haven't talked about findings yet, but that was probably the biggest aha or finding that I feel like I learned during the research
Yeah,
process.
super leadership is super important. So this is published. Are there, and I'm pretty sure you anonymized information in terms of the people, but like, did you publish like examples of environment where they didn't feel like they could thrive or where they felt like they could thrive? Like tangible
Yes.
example. Yeah. Give me
Yeah,
an
yep,
example.
yep. So some of the examples were, I mean, it was all anonymous, absolutely. And so to protect the women's identity and to protect the institutions that they were, talking about and anybody else involved. And so I used aliases. I actually used names of famous Black women athletes. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I did like
So like
Althea
Flojo or something?
Gibson, and yeah, I did Flojo. Flojo's in
Okay.
there. Yeah, I did, Serena and Venus Williams. So yeah, I picked kind of just a plethora of alias names to use, and, yeah, the women had some very powerful stories, things I'm sure that wouldn't surprise some of your listeners, maybe some would, but, moments where and some were small and some were big, some were around one of the women had a moment, where her she was invited to an event to celebrate her, and her boss was not, uh, the one that put her up for the event and was not happy that to see her go, and verbalized that to her. So, things like that, or being excluded moments as far as, seeing all of the other counterparts that are at the same level, say all the deputy athletic directors were all walking down the hallway towards some sort of event, and this one woman, either wasn't invited, wasn't told about it, didn't know about it, um, felt actively excluded in that moment in time. And so there was a lot of stories like that. Those exclusionary moments, in the exclusionary stories, the number one finding also was just being the only was enough to feel excluded. So though I was just talking or deferring to moments where there were active things happening, we kind of looked at active leadership behaviors and passive leadership behaviors. A passive leadership behavior would be that if there is only one Black woman in the entire athletic department, she's going to feel excluded. Point blank and period. End of story. And so that leader, whoever leads that department, is going to have to be very attuned to that and actively doing things so that that woman does not feel excluded in that environment. Um, Simply being the only was big enough, and that came through for all of the women's voices.
Is so I in that situation, there is actually s- enough that a leader could do to make someone feel included if they feel excluded because they are the only in the room, sort of hiring
Yes.
somebody else, right? So there are things they can
Yes.
do to make someone feel included.
Yes.
Talk about
Yes.
that.
So a lot of
What are
the yeah. Well, and so if you think of leadership theory and all of the plethora of leadership theory that's been out there for years, that one of the slivers that's newer is inclusive leadership theory. And in that, there's Veli Korkmaz 2022, I believe, came out with a study that I kind of use this as a framework for my study, that valuing difference, um, showing appreciation, actively showing appreciation. Um, I believe it's valuing uniqueness, so actually bringing forth the uniqueness, similar to the difference, and then actively, um, staying engaged and committed to and accountable to anything around diversity and inclusion planning or organizational values that talk around diversity and inclusion. Making sure there's an active process and accountability process with that. Those are kind of the four things that came up. And when I compared that to then what the women were saying when they felt included, it was definitely moments where their leaders had done that. They either sought them out, they lifted their voice up, um, they gave them a seat at the table, as we say, the proverbial table, and not just giving them a seat at the table, but also lifting up their voice at that table. So, we want you here at this decision-making table, but we also want to hear your voice. Um, Giving credit where credit's due, making sure that their voices are not being lost if there's an idea that happens. And in the interview process, let's say it isn't as a woman of color, she's the only Black woman in that environment. Um, it's making sure that we're balancing not using their strengths as a tokenism piece, as a this she's now speaking for all Black women, and this is what they all say, it's making sure that they're being valued for what their individual comments are, um, as an individual. And there was a
Yeah.
very distinct difference in that, which I thought was fascinating. Yeah, but so yes, there are things that leaders can do to actually make Black women feel included in the workplace, and
Yeah.
then they're going to thrive, and then they're going to work harder at their job, stay longer, be happier, all of the things that come with job
So,
satisfaction.
so there's a couple things you said there that I find super interesting. The research in leadership theory, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
your research from tangible surveys matched up with the research in leadership. That's like, I had to feel good. This is affirmation and confirmation that what the direction I'm going is correct, right? I
Yes,
think that's excellent.
it was a huge affirmation for me. It's also an affirmation for my own personal experiences.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it validates it.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to enough other identified people in any kind of business or environment, and being an other is really hard. And sometimes you can't tangibly say why, even though you may
Right.
know in the back of your head. And so I was very pleased with the results because I felt like I was able to deliver on a platter. Here are the validating reasons that people are saying that why, and giving their own language. This is why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling in my workplace, in my work setting, and also to give people tools to use as well. Someday I will turn my dissertation into a little how-to book, and I will be giving it out for a small fee to ADs everywhere, because it's a how-to book. It's like, here, if you want a Black woman in your environment for whatever reason, this is what you need to do to make sure that she feels fine and okay, and that she can thrive in the job for you. So
Well,
it's just,
let me ask a couple
yeah,
questions here because I have about
yeah,
3 or 4 bullet points, and I'm gonna see if I can remember all of them. The
yes,
first one
yes.
is a statement. When I interviewed a former athletic director, Charles Small, about social workers, I came to
Oh,
my own conclusion that social work is kind of leadership because you have to identify the individual that may be a subgroup of a bigger group, but they're also a part of the overall group, but you have to make sure the individual is recognized, and that's very important,
yes,
right?
yes.
And then
Yep,
what you just
yep.
said, you recognize the individual for who they are, but they don't necessarily have to represent the whole subgroup that they're a part of, right? Because that's also
Absolutely,
could be exclusionary. I think that's
absolutely.
excellent. Um, the question I have though is, I wonder, if you can fit, if you can swap out Black with women and put any other categorized other in that,
Yeah.
and will they still feel excluded based on the things you said, or feel included based on the things you said?
Yeah, yeah, that's of course in the end of your dissertation, you write future possible
Oh yeah,
studies,
right. Yeah, okay.
and that is in that area for sure. Because I just selected, Black women,
Hmm.
because that's my own experience, and I
Yeah,
have a
right.
lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
friends in the business, yeah. The other thing I didn't look at either that's would be a very interesting, so we make assumptions,
Okay.
and I made the assumption kind of going into the research that, um, all of the women were going to say, um, or had exclusionary experiences with only, like, white supervisors, and that was not the case. And
Okay.
so that really was just kind of a reality check for myself, personally, to be like, "Hey, yeah, you got some bias too, and work yourself through that." But yeah, the women had experiences with all races, creeds, you name it, identities for their leaders when they were talking about in reference to exclusionary or inclusionary moments. And so that's an area of future research that hasn't even been touched yet. So, looking at the leader identity and the follower or the staff members identity as
Oh,
well to kind
that
of see
gives me
how those
another
play
follow
off.
up. Everything you're
See?
saying piques my curiosity. So
Yeah.
then, so if the leader is this anonymous leader, and I'm the only Black woman, hypothetically, I
Yes.
feel excluded. But let's say if the leader is a Black woman, is that Black woman who's the leader included into the group that I feel excluded? Does that lower my, does the leader stay analogous, right?
Yeah,
Or yeah, I
yeah,
don't know if the
yeah.
question is coming out right, but does that make
Yes.
sense?
No, I follow. Yeah,
Okay.
I did not track or look at the leader's identity at all.
Okay.
And some people in my interviews brought up their leader's
Yeah.
identity. I didn't ask explicitly. Um,
Okay.
and I had one interviewee said that their leader was a Black woman. And she felt that it was there could only be one woman at the top
Oh wow.
environment.
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother realm of research if
Did
you
the
look
leader
at
feel that, or the woman you interviewed
the woman I
felt that?
interviewed felt that way.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and
So was that internal, or was the environment that was being created? You know what I mean? Like how did, like 'cause
yeah,
sometimes we have our
yeah,
own narratives, right? So
100%,
yeah.
100%, yes, 100%. And I'll say 2 things to that. So, one, that the research around in women's studies, there's a ton of research around women's studies and, that narrative of there can only be one woman at the top. In
Right.
that particular case, the feelings of exclusion still came out to be very similar to the rest of all the other
Yeah. Everybody
stories.
else. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Right? So whether the leader was green, yellow, black, blue, whatever, how the woman felt in those moments, they felt isolated. They felt that they weren't, they had low self-worth, that they weren't being validated. Those kinds of feelings still came up. So, a further study would be looking at the identity of each and to go from there. Just because I personally have my own assumptions that I had made from my own experiences. And so the other thing about an EDD, or at least the solving a problem in your in your work environment or in your life or whatever that is, um I think I went through a more emotional process
Oh
during
wow.
my entire research because I was being healed as I was doing the research, which was kind of also cool. It was also like going through therapy while
Yeah. Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to
Excellent.
do
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but it was good. It was great.
I think that's actually excellent there. Now here's the question. So at the current moment, we're the head volleyball coach there. All right.
Yes.
But let's say we become the CEO of a corporation with 100 or 200 employees, right? Big budgets, making all these executive decisions, strategy, all the things. how will that help you lead? Because at that point, you're not just leading Black women. You're not just, you're leading a diverse group. So tell me how that would help you in terms of being in a leadership role. How has this
Yeah.
process, right, and what you've learned, the healing
Yeah.
process, your experiences, all the things, how
Yeah.
will this help you lead when you get into a leadership role?
Yeah. That's a really good question.
Mhm.
Um, I I see on a microcosm here just with my own assistant coaches in the team. It's a very smaller kind of scale, but I think the biggest thing I've learned about leadership is it's still always about people. And it doesn't matter if you're in charge of 500 or 5 people, how people feel when they enter their workspace or your space or whatever the in company, the environment, like that is going to dictate how successful a company or organization or team or department is. And so whether it's, the CEO in front of 500 people, making sure that the people who are touching the actual people, working with the people at different levels are taking care of their people as well. Um, I really believe that leadership is about people. I don't think that we can get away from that. And I know we talk about AI and the things that are happening with that realm, and that's great. But I at the end of the day, leadership is people to people and it's you just change the level of whether I'm training the trainer and they're training their trainers to work one on hand with people, or maybe it's a direct connection. But I think that leadership is about people connection.
So similar to what Dr. Small talked to me about with social work, right? Understanding and valuing the identity of the individual within the subgroup as a part of the overall group. So your findings, so tell me about your findings that all leaders could lean from. What you just gave me was a real big general sum up that leadership is about
Yeah.
people, but tell me about your
Yeah.
specific findings that you think either you would implement or you suggest that other leaders possibly implement.
Yeah. Um, well, if it's not you personally, it's making
Okay.
sure if it's not the leader in like if they're let's say it's a company at 500, um, it's making sure that that person is doing their due diligence to get to know the people that they immediately
Okay.
impact,
Yeah.
and then making sure that those people are doing their job to really get to know the people they immediately impact. And that goes on, so as far as it can go. I also really fully believe, and this kind of came out in my study, not on purpose. It kind of came out as a side thing, but these feedback loops. Um, the best leaders that I've seen or have experienced, or people that I've interviewed have had or experienced, they are really, really, really good listeners, and they don't just listen for service, and they don't just listen to say they've done it. They actually really do listen and hear what people are saying, whether that's in survey form, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation. In the corporate world, we see these RSOs. I don't know what that stands for, but they're like these feedback loops or groups of teams that are set up, right? Places where I see that do really, really well and people are happy, and happy employees and better producers are employee resource groups. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
um, they have leaders that actually listen to their feedback, and are communicative in that way. And it's not easy. I'm not saying you're saying this is easy to do. Um, but when people feel they are part of something, even the women in the study that I had, when they felt that their leaders reached out to them because of who they are as individuals, not because just that they were Black women, but because of who they were as individuals and because they were adding value to whatever was happening, um, that was what made them feel included.
Yeah. I think that's
That'd be
excellent.
my biggest
So
findings.
so let's see. If 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 I reach out and listen and get to know the people that I work with that I may be leading, do you think that would prevent a party down the hallway where everybody's going and one person is not invited? Like, do you think that would those types of things would prevent that because everybody's on my radar as a leader. I understand who is who kind of situation. What do you think about that?
I do, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, the one thing that came out of my research was that it's an active process. Inclusive leadership is active. You have to be on it. The default is to be exclusionary. How easy is it to walk down a hall and just go to whatever party and not knock on someone's door if their door is closed or they're the quieter person in the room or whatever, you name it. It is an active process. It takes someone going out of their comfort zone or their normal to be inclusionary, to bring somebody out. Same thing with, say you're in a meeting, or someone's in a meeting and there's the quiet. One of the women, this actually happened, and this is an example that I was going to say. One of the women talked about she got a seat at the table, really, and so she was at the assistant athletic director role, but still felt that she didn't have maybe the knowledge or the wherewithal. Like she felt like she couldn't be there yet. And she described a moment where her athletic director posed a question for whatever they were about to do. And I can't remember what the context was, but this woman stayed back and was kind of sitting back in her chair. And the athletic director said, no, like come out, lean forward on the, into the meeting and tell me what you think. I want to hear from you. And the woman was kind of like, oh, me? Oh, I don't know if you want to hear from me. And she was nervous. And the athletic director said, no, like everyone else, like move back. I want to know what you have to say because you've done these things before or whatever the answer was. And so that moment in time, it was, maybe 3 minutes. But she felt so included and so valued and seen in that moment in time. But again, that athletic director had to go maybe outside of her norm to do that. It's easy to say, like, pose a question to the group. Hey, what do you guys think we should do on this event? And then whoever answers, okay, fine. But this leader, this athletic director, sought out the interviewees'
with
input.
intent.
Yeah, with intent. So it takes time, too. Yeah.
Okay, I think I want to ask one more question on this topic.
Okay.
You mentioned that the default is to be exclusionary. Is that how you said it?
Yes.
Is that if I can expand that statement so we can be specific but general, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Are we saying that the default in organizational leadership is to be exclusionary, or the leadership default is to be, like, tell me how to couch that?
Yes. According to how my research came out in my dissertation, yes, that is a accurate statement. So in the actual, when I went to code the actual statements that the women said, there were no inclusionary moments that they discussed with me that did not have direct involvement of their supervisors.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And
say that
in
one
the
more time for me.
exclusionary,
Say that one more time.
yep,
There were no
moments. There were no moments the women talked about feeling included that did not have a direct link to what their boss did or did not do.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So exclusionary, when they would talk about exclusionary moments, when I was coding those, simply being the only was the one thing that came out. That didn't matter if their boss had anything to do with it or not. They were just the only. And so that felt exclusionary enough.
Yeah.
But when they were talking about inclusive moments, there was always tied to a boss's actions.
The person in the leadership role, right? Actions from the leadership role. I find it very interesting. Well, congratulations on publishing that and getting your doctorate done.
Thank you. So excited.
Excellent. So I want to ask a question. The next part of this, and we won't go too long, but I do want to know. So Augustana, right?
Yes.
Head volleyball coach.
Yes.
Comparatively, when you talk about like FBS schools, right? The budget is probably not real big if we talk comparatively. I do wonder if, like, does the school allot funds to you? Do you have to raise your own money? Like, tell me a little bit about how the apparatus of being a head coach, as opposed to just recruiting and leading and trying to win scheduling games. Tell me a little bit about that apparatus when you talk about finance and those types of things.
Yes. Yeah. So we, I think at the Division 2 and 3 level, depending, we're well supported, as an entire athletic department. We have Division 1 men's hockey, and we have 22 sports at our institution, and we're about, as a group, as a whole, I wanna say that we're at 2,000 day undergrad students, and then the athletes are about 440-ish student athletes
Oh,
as a
okay.
whole.
Yeah,
18 to
almost
20
40%
of
of it.
them being, volleyball players.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, we're also an institution that, is driven by enrollment, and so, we do have to get creative in how we generate enough funds to run the program, um, and really offer a really well-rounded student athlete experience. And so we get creative. We're allocated some funds, and then we try to balance, and add to that as we go. It probably costs in our region's a little bit. It's really strong in volleyball, extremely strong. On any given night, there are 16 teams. I would say 6 to 8 are ranked in the top 25, maybe top
Wow.
15, even in our conference, and then in our region, we're in the same region. It's us, the MIAA, and the GAC, and usually there's like 6 more ranked teams in between those 2 conferences as well. So it's a very competitive league. Um, and we draw a lot of really good talent. Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, that's really good volleyball. And so all of our athletes can play Division 1. We're competing with the Summit League, which is a mid-major Division 1 conference in the area. And so the players that we recruit are looking for a very good experience where they're taken care of and where they have all they need financially. We take coach buses everywhere, usually a fly trip in the preseason. This Not this fall, but next fall we're going to Alaska for our preseason tournament. Um,
Wow.
we just got back from Costa Rica. We fundraised for it, but we did a study abroad 10-day trip to Costa Rica with the team, which was amazing. Um, but yeah, I would say we're generating probably about 75% of our operating budget on any given year, give or take a couple grand here or there. But
And is
yeah,
that
it's
so generating, is that based on some type of revenue is going to come in from some ticket sales, or is that like you're going out raising money in various types of ways? Like tell me about when you say generating your operating budget. What does that mean?
yes. So in the off season, a good chunk comes from we run club tournaments. And so that is where they're high school level age students or athletes, or at least or junior high. The volleyball clubs around the area will host club tournaments. They come in, they pay a registration fee to come in. That's where I talk about generating revenue. That's where we're just putting on a product, an event for people to come
Okay.
to. So
Yep.
ticket sales through that, merchandise sales. We can sell merchandise. We get a cut of that, so we'll do that during those events as well. Um, and then it's the private donation space. And thankfully, we have a lot of really, really good supporters, that love the program. Some are tied to our current players and team. Some are, most are alums and families of alums. But yeah, that's the relationship piece, right? So I do a lot of relationship building outside of the day-to-day job, the recruiting part of it, and try to to build those relationships. We also have Sioux Falls is a very supportive city, and Augustana is one of the 2 like institutions in town, and so companies around here support us, and we have a lot of alums who are from here and stay here and own companies now too. So that's been great. We are we're about 90% fundraised for a Terraflex floor. We'll be the first in the conference to get it. We should have it by this fall. Um, Selling four major sponsors, of the 4 corners of the Terraflex floor. And 3 are done, and I believe the next one will be done here in the next couple of weeks.
Oh,
So
that's excellent. So a creative compendium of different things that go into you bringing in. So
yes.
your budget So let's not get into today's finances. Let's look at like 2 or 3 years ago finances, right? So what was the
Okay.
budget you were operating a few years ago, right?
About 50 grand. And then
Okay.
it costs us about 125 to 150 to actually do the things we need to do.
Okay. And then, so how much did you bring in a couple years ago? What were you were responsible as the head of the program, whether it be cultivation,
Yes.
whether it be the
Yeah.
camps, whatever it is,
Yes.
what would you say you were
Yes.
responsible for?
Yeah. It's anywhere between 80 and 100 grand on any given year, I would say, on average.
80 and 100 grand, and we're looking at going into our ninth year. Let's just round up. So let's say 100 grand going into our ninth year. So we're almost responsible for roughly $1 million over the last 8 to 10 years there at Augustana that you were responsible
Yes.
for cultivating, bringing in
Yes.
revenue,
Yes. Yes.
donations, sponsorships,
Yes.
all those things. I think
All
that's
the
excellent.
things. Yes.
All the things, right?
Yeah.
When you talk
Thank you.
about cultivation and fundraising, I think that's an excellent thing.
Yeah. It's funny because
So, yeah,
you don't really think of it like that, but you do it because you want the team to have a really good experience. You
yeah.
want the players to
And that's just
love
what it's
their
about.
time, and they do. And um the more I think the more the word gets out that people love their experience, people want to be involved in that. So that only helps, right? That just generates more buzz either within the program or just outside of the program. So yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting. I actually, 2 questions, and then we can wrap after these 2 questions, if I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
remember both.
Yes.
The first one is, here's what's interesting as opposed to if you were just working in development in the department,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The difference I hear is if I'm working in development in department, I am telling the story of what's happening in the department, but my job
Yes.
is to raise money. What
Yes.
you're doing is I'm telling the story that I helped create, right, in the
Yeah.
department to
Yeah.
raise money
Yeah.
for stories that I am creating and want to continue to create. I think that's interesting because you're actually creating, you're
Mhm.
actively involved in creating a story that you tell to raise money as opposed to just raising money and that's your primary job. I think that's very interesting. Um,
Absolutely.
so I imagine one of the bullet points in the job when it's offered to you is, yeah, you got to be able to raise money. Some coaches aren't big fundraisers. So there's definitely value in going to the powers that be and saying, look, we need a new floor. We need this high tech floor and I'm going to raise the money for it. I'm just letting you know. So give me about a year or two, we'll have a floor. As opposed
Yes.
to, hey, we need a new floor. What can you do to help us
Yes.
get the floor? Yes, I think there's
Yes.
value in that, right?
Yes. It's a partnership for sure.
It's a
Yep.
partnership and
It's a
offsetting, and
partnership.
you raising most of your budget actually, like you said, helps the department focus its funds on wherever else it needs to, Division One hockey and wherever else it needs to
Yeah.
focus its funds.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm gonna make this happen and be successful and make sure we're ranked in the top 25 every year.
Yes.
Tell me about Inclusion Inroads, the company that
Oh,
you co-founded. Right, we didn't even get to that. Just give me a
yes.
little
Yes.
overview of. Tell me what that company is.
Yeah, so my colleague and I, Brooke Rundle, Dr. Brooke Rundle, she's out of Denver, Colorado. It actually came eh, we birthed it in 2020. So after I had been called to do a lot of diversity and inclusion trainings and speaking and moments with folks. And then right when for years and um Dr. Rundle had been and well, let me back up. People would ask me to come in and speak about my own experiences, being a woman of color in predominantly white spaces and how to make spaces more inclusive. And then Dr. Rundle, a friend of mine who I met years ago, she's very involved in the trans community and really supports LGBTQ um, environments, supportive environments, and really it focuses on the mental health side. And she is a psychologist. She has her doctorate in psychology, I believe. And so in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, we both were being called in to do these emergency diversity and inclusion trainings for lots of departments out there. And within that couple 6 months after he was murdered, we both kind of said, this is the emergency response is not it. It's not there's too much damage done. People are not healed or healing in those moments in time. And so we kind of birthed its inclusion inroads, and we come in and do some preemptive. How do you make, in general, how do you make your space inclusive for all who enter it? And we really tag along, kind of along the realms of psychological safety. Like, how does a coach, a staff, a supervisor, an administrator, you name it, how do they create psychologically safe environments for their people to thrive in? And it's based in her research around mental health. It's based in my research around creating those inclusive spaces for folks. And the political environment right now is a little tough, and so we're leaning into that psychological safety verbiage right now. And we just got done, like I was telling you, we just got done talking at the Tucker Center at the University of Minnesota Tucker Center, running a session on implicit bias and how to kind of create psychologically safe spaces um, for your followers. And yeah, so the Inclusion Heroes was started in 2020, and we've been kind of going strong ever since. We did some work we spoke at the Pac-12 Mental Health Equity Summit, like 2-3 years ago. We've done work with the MIAC conference office. We've done work with We Coach. We went out to a We Coach event in Denver last year now, 2 years ago. So yeah, we're kind of in and around and trying to do more sustainable training for folks, longer.
Is there longer term, like, keep us on a retainer as we can counsel you to be
Yes.
inclusive? Is there,
Yes,
is
because
there,
the one-shot things are great,
yeah.
but you really can't create an inclusive environment in one day, in one shot. It is an ongoing process. Um,
So
so
here's
yeah.
what I wonder about this type of business. And so think about your research, right? The people that are bringing you in are operating with intent to bring in this type of education and consulting to help us to be more inclusive, I assume. But here's some assumptions. Is that because there's a problem, right? We've been told that we have a problem here. Let's try to fix it, right? Or is that because they're just inclusive and let's continue to educate ourselves? Like, for example, the women you interviewed that were in environments that weren't inclusive, that weren't operating with intent. If they're ignorant to not know that they're not inclusive, would they bring in this type of, work or type of consult? Like, basically,
Right.
the people that need it, are they going to get it, or are you going out giving it to people who already understand it? I mean, I don't know. There's a question in there somewhere
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, yes. Well, that the emergency help, we're getting these negative feedback, help us. That was where we were like, this is not where we want it.
Exactly right. What you said in
Fine,
the
we
beginning.
can, but that's not the space that we wanted to really focus on. Which is why we go from so she has a bunch of research, and her doctorate was in it started in team performance, and how psychological, safe and mental health safe, mentally healthy, safe spaces help athletes and coaches perform better. And that's her background. And so then I took that and paired that with psychologically safe spaces around inclusion, and we've kind of morphed those together. And it's about making a team perform, whether that's a staff group of, or a team of student athletes perform. And then she does some individual actual counseling on the side as well. So the performance piece is the part that we kind of wanted to get to be able to speak with people before something bad happens. Can we create this mentally healthy space so that everyone can thrive, no matter what their identity is or how they identify, so that the team as a group, or the group of people, can perform, whatever they're working on, whatever they're doing, whether it's just the day-to-day 9 to 5, whether it is, a team that's trying to win an actual championship, or you name it. So that's kind of the angle that we took, because we felt that it just was not as effective to come in and be the emergency. It's not sustainable. And when something bad happens, like George Floyd, we were doing so much work around, come fix us, and then you're gone, and it's like dead. And now we're in a space where it's becoming taboo or against laws to actually have a conversation around diversity and inclusion. And so we're kind of pivoting a little bit to that, going back to our mental health
Well,
route or psychological safety
yeah.
space.
So what I hear,
Mhm.
right? Because like you mentioned, the environment is all crazy and people attacking everything. What I hear
Yes.
is we are a consulting company that will help you with performance as a group, as a staff, as an organization. We'll come in, we'll assess your performance and give you suggestions on how to perform better as a group. Now, rooted in
Mhm.
some of the suggestions might
Mhm.
be inclusion,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But
Yep.
we help you with organizational performance. To me, that's where you go, right? Lean on what you know, what she knows. Performance is the front porch, and then you
Mhm.
come in, and then one of the assessment might be, you got a real problem here because this one Black woman here feels super excluded, and then we look at her productivity, and she's very productive. You need to protect your asset here, and the way you protect your asset
Absolutely.
is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Protect your
Yes.
asset is by doing these types of things. So yeah, start with performance, man. Well,
Exactly.
again, Dr.
Exactly.
Jacobs, this is an excellent conversation. Again, I appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. That was Dr. Jennifer Jacobs. She's the head volleyball coach at Augustana University, co-founder of Inclusion Inroads, and she now has her doctorate, right? Published her dissertation. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.